Thanks a lot for making the time, Carly. I feel like just in our quick chat already, you've shared some golden nuggets here. And as I explained, I really like to hear a bit about your background and what you've done kind of to get where you are today. So it'd be awesome to hear that, but I know it comes with a caveat. So let
Sure.
me
Well,
know,
thank you so
share the
much.
highlights. Yeah, and then feel free
Sure.
to share
Well,
your cautionary tale as well.
okay. Well, thank you so much for having me. It is really great to be here and to have this conversation with you. I'm excited about it.
Same.
Um, what Imran's alluding to is the thing that I just shared right before we started recording was how I know I used to be a career counselor working very directly with lots of students in educational institutions. And so many students are very keen to hear other people's career stories. And I think that's great. And I would coordinate programs where we brought in alumni and they would share what they're doing and how they got there. And I do see that there's a lot of value in that. There's definitely value in learning from other people. But sometimes I actually feel like that goes too far because if you bring in people both to an educational institution or like on a podcast or what have you, when you learn from other people, sometimes if you start to see options A, B, C that you've never heard of, that sounds really great. And you get so excited about these three options. But at the same time, there are like hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands and thousands of other options that you might not be hearing of. So I'm always reluctant of sharing too much about what I do or how I get there with somebody else who's listening who might assume that they'll be able to do the exact same things I did and get exactly where I got, or that that's the only path they could or should follow. And there are
That's
just a lot of ways to get a lot of places. And I worry sometimes that when we over focus on other people's journeys, we stop ourselves from imagining what could I be doing if I did whatever I really wanted to do. Because just because someone hasn't necessarily done that before or hasn't shared that journey publicly doesn't mean it's not possible.
It's a great reminder, Carly, and I think timely for a lot of students. It's so true. I think I kind of approached my educational journey and career journey that way. I heard about engineering from an engineer and decided I'm gonna do engineering, not really understanding how many different options there are within that and what it really entailed. So a great point. Um,
Look at you now, an engineer who hosts a podcast.
Yeah, who would have thought? I didn't meet any podcast engineers, so
No, probably back when we were in university, like did podcasts like barely existed.
it's true. It's so true. And so I think at some point, yeah, you just have to try things for yourself. So
Mhm.
that's a great point. And maybe, if you do feel at any point like sharing a bit about what you've done in the past, like that's always helpful to learn from.
So with that caveat about like just because I've done it doesn't mean that's what somebody else should do or needs to do to get into this field. I'm happy to share my career path. I think I took a bit of a different approach than you did. I didn't start out in post-secondary being like, this is what I want to do in terms of job title or major. Um, I think I had a lot of interests. I still have a lot of interests. And I basically just kept exploring those interests and really took the approach through my educational experiences of like, I'm going to take courses that I'm interested in because that's what I want to be learning about. And I'll find a way to use it. I don't know exactly what I'm
Cool.
going to do professionally, but I know what I'm interested in. And I know I'm also the type of person who, like, I am very intrinsically motivated, but I'm not always that extrinsically motivated. So the idea of being like, I'm going to take this set of courses or do this kind of experience because that's what will get me a job, especially if that's the kind of job that I didn't think I wanted anyways. Like, whoo, I just cannot imagine how miserable I would have been in school because I mean, and frankly, I was pretty miserable in school a lot of the time from grades 1 to 12 because I didn't have any choice over what I was doing, or didn't have a lot of choice over what I was doing. And then I got to post secondary and it was like the world opened up and I could do a lot of things that I was interested in. So I studied psychology. I knew I was quite interested in education, broadly speaking, but I also knew that I didn't want to become a classroom teacher. And I just figured that understanding things about people would be helpful in life. I also liked helping people, liked the idea of helping people, cared about mental health, thought maybe I'd be a counselor or therapist, but I wasn't sure. And then I continued to gain a lot of experiences in classes and outside of classes that helped me see I was really interested in working in education. I really cared a lot about education, but I still didn't really know exactly what type of job I wanted. And as it came closer to graduation, the best title that I found that kind of captured my interests was becoming a guidance counselor. So I actually thought, okay, maybe I'll try to be a high school guidance counselor. How do I get there? And it turns out that in the province of Ontario, you need to be a certified teacher to become a guidance counselor. And I have all sorts of feelings on this. I could do a whole episode or a whole TED talk on this because there are a lot of reasons why that's not a great system. But um, the point was, I decided to become a teacher. It also just so happened that the year I was graduating from my undergraduate degree was the last year that the teacher certification program in Ontario was going to be 1 year instead of 2. So I figured if this is ever something that I want to do, I may as well do it now. Well, it's going to take half the time and cost half the cost that it would in the future.
Makes sense.
Thanks. So yeah, thinking back though, it's been a while, but yeah, I became a teacher and then I set out to look for jobs not in teaching. And I wanted to do something where I would be working with students on issues that I cared about. And the issues that I cared about were basically all the things that guidance counselors work on with students, things like making life decisions, figuring out what you're going to do after you graduate from high school, things like mental health and social life, and just like how these pieces of a person's life outside of class really fit together. And I got very, very lucky, and I found my first full time job at an independent school in Toronto that had this really unique, basically like guidance curriculum. So
Hmm.
I was hired to be the program manager for this guidance program. And I got to coordinate a lot of programs that brought in speakers and developed curriculum. And I was teaching and facilitating things sometimes. Um, yeah, I did all sorts of stuff. Half of it I can't remember on the spot right now, but I did
Sure.
a lot of exciting stuff related to mental health, career development, and academic success. Those were like the 3 pillars of the program.
Okay.
And I was just covering someone's mat leave, so I could only be there for a year. But it was a really good introduction to me of the types of jobs that exist in education that I knew I wanted, but that didn't really have like a standardized label the way that jobs like teaching or guidance counseling did.
Hmm.
So in a way, that was kind of the launch pad for many things that came next. And I'm happy to shed some more light on the other things I've done. But frankly, I've held a lot of jobs, so it would take a long time. But essentially, the main things that I've done ended up being transitioning into coordinating health and wellness programs at the university or college level, being an academic advisor for university and college students, and being a career counselor for university and college students.
That's really helpful to hear about, Carly. Even, if someone doesn't hopefully feel like they have to take that exact path, it's just interesting to kind of hear the way you approached it, just to understand what are some of those options? What are some of those, D to Z options out there?
Well,
Um,
thanks.
yeah, so really appreciate the insights. Um, I have a ton of questions that kind of come from that. Some around, what kind of questions you ask students when they come to you, try
Ooh,
to figure some of those things out. How do you probe deeper to help some of these students figure out, maybe not their entire life plan, but a little bit of what they're going to do next? Um, are there kind of questions you ask them, or is there an approach you take? Because for students looking at this or job seekers, maybe there's some questions that they can start thinking about. Anything
yeah.
like that coming to mind?
Yes, absolutely. I think I've had a lot of students come to me over the years looking for help with a job search, and their basic question is commonly, what keywords do I have to put on Indeed or LinkedIn? That's
Yeah,
what it comes
did
down
that
to. They're
too.
like, what's the job title that I'm looking for? And the basis of my approach to my own career and how I advise students has basically been that job titles are rarely the full story. And that's especially true if you're working in a field that's not regulated. So, regulated fields are fields like medicine, law, teaching, where you actually do require a specific degree and a specific certification or license to practice in that field. So if
Right.
you go into one of those fields, there tend to be more standardized titles. But outside of those fields, there's a lot of variety. So the first question that I tend to ask students is, what type of work do you want to be doing? Or put a different way, what impact do you want to have on the world? So when it comes down to something like what impact do you want to have on the world, that's not a job title kind of question. That's a question like for me, when I was like 20, I might have said something like, I want to make the education system better for students. And
Okay.
that remains true. There's a lot of things that I've done in my career that tie back to that overarching goal. And there are still aspirations I have for my career that relate to that goal. But that has looked like and will look like a lot of different things for me. So, yeah, go ahead.
No, that's helpful because I can see how that helps students just get a little more specific. And I'm glad again you gave us your example because I was thinking of how a student might answer that question, and I felt like most would say, "Well, I want to help people," which
Right.
is always nice to hear. But you kind of took it one step further. You want to make the education system better. So I can see how students might go, "Oh, well, I want to make food people like or music people enjoy or help them set up businesses of their own." So I can see that question really generating some new ideas.
Yeah. And then I think from there, there's also this sense of like, because there are so many different ways a person can help people, let's say, and that is a pretty common answer, like, I want to help people.
Yeah,
That
which
can
is
come back
nice.
to the, it's what?
Which is nice, but it's also helpful to get more specific. Yeah.
Right. And so the first part of the question I asked before I rephrased into this very big picture, loosey goosey, kind of like, what impact do you want to have on the world? And I'll recognize too that not everybody feels a strong sense of like, I want to make an impact on the world. For
True.
some people, they want a job where they can show up to work and just like do their job, make some money, and go home. And they're making an impact on the world in some way because I believe we all make an impact on the world in some way. But maybe they might feel more drawn towards making an impact through their personal life and they want their career to just be a job that they go to, do the work and go home. And
Totally.
that's totally fine too. So that question of what type of work do you want to do, I think is also related to this what impact do you want to have kind of question,
Okay.
because what type of work do you want to do does not elicit the answer of I want to be an engineer or I want to be a nurse or I want to be a teacher. It elicits the type of answer like if you're talking about I want to help someone, well, do you want to help people by talking to them through like one-on-one conversations? Do you want to help people by teaching classes or working with large groups of people? What type of people do you want to help? Do you want to help children? Do you want to help adults? Do you want to help people in your local community? Do you want to help people around the world?
Hmm.
Um, if you're somebody who's thinking about careers in healthcare, like, do you want to be a kind of frontline practitioner who is actually providing a direct service to people? Or do you want to be conducting some kind of healthcare research that's going to have the potential to affect millions of people, but it's not because you're the one delivering that frontline treatment?
That is
So there's
really
like
cool. Yeah.
every, well, not every job, but most jobs help people in some way. But like how far to the front of that spectrum of like frontline service provider versus like behind the scenes kind of research or policy type person, where do you see yourself along that spectrum?
Yeah, that is really helpful. And I feel like I learn a ton from these conversations myself, Carly, because that feels like the answer I'd have given in high school as well. I want to help people. But it
And
kind
that's
of
great.
takes someone to guide you, yeah, through the thinking, like what kind of people, where, how, like those are really helpful questions. So I hope, again, for job seekers watching this at any stage of your career, if you're asking yourself these questions, that's helpful in terms of
Mm,
kind of isolating, an area, and it may not be forever, but for now, that is resonating with you. Um,
yeah.
really,
Yes.
really insightful.
Yes, and if you're someone who has difficulty coming up with those kind of things on your own, there also are tools you can use to basically react to things. So one thing that I've used with students that can actually work well is like the UN Sustainable Development Goals. when we're talking about the type of impact that people want to have on the world, there are like world kind of frameworks of here are changes that the world needs. Here are things that the world could benefit from. Which of these interest you? Which do you feel strongly about? Which might you want to contribute to? None of us alone is going to like achieve a UN sustainable development goal or any of these like huge big picture changing the world things. But we can have an impact on one or maybe more than one if we put some time and effort into it. We'll work with other people in that field to move the needle. And I really like what you had to say too about this idea that like career choices don't have to be permanent. When you're thinking about what do you want to do, you can think about it in the timeline of like right now or for the next little while or for the foreseeable future. It doesn't have to be like I make a decision when I'm 18 and that's the thing I stick with for the rest of my life.
Yeah, thank you, because I just feel like that gets a little daunting, and that's where it make gets tough to make a decision because it feels like it's permanent. But kind of to your point, right? You have been through a number of jobs. I've done the same. There's there's just room to change and grow at any point. So I think that's just reassuring to hear sometimes.
Yes, yes. And I think society is becoming more accepting of that as it becomes more normal. It's kind of symbiotic. Like it
Hmm,
becomes more normal, so society has to become more accepting of it. And then
sure.
as society becomes more accepting of it, it becomes more common. But the world today is a very different place than it was like when my parents were growing up and when most people my age's parents were growing up. And so I know I work with a lot of students, and this includes a lot of students from around the world too. And I recognize that like the labor market is different in different countries. Career development and career pathways are different in different countries. But
Mhm.
a lot of people are very influenced in their career decisions by their parents and extended families and like what's normal in a generation older than them.
Yeah,
And sometimes the world changes. So what's normal in our parents' generation isn't necessarily normal anymore. And the kind of advice that they give is well intentioned. And sometimes it's in line with reality. And sometimes it's not. And it really depends on what your parents' lives and employment contexts and knowledge of the current labor market look like.
100%. And that kind of reminds me to ask if students, are again hearing about the type of resources you're talking about for the first time, where can they learn more? Like, do you have advice on how to find guidance services or career
Oh,
services?
God, yes.
Because I feel like I feel like actually a lot of students don't take advantage of these tools, and it's mostly because they just haven't been told how to.
Yes. I can confidently say from having worked in like multiple college and university advising offices that the vast majority, if not all, I want to say all, but I don't like making generalizations because you never know. Maybe there's some school out there
For
doing
sure.
something totally different. But the vast majority of colleges and universities in Canada these days have advising services. And those services are again, almost always, if not always, free for students to use. And sometimes they're even free for recent graduates to use. So
Yeah.
I've worked in places where people who graduated up to 1 year ago or 5 years ago can come back and receive the same sorts of free advising supports, participate in workshops, and go to job fairs just like current students can. So if you're a current student listening to this sounds like such a cheesy PSA, but if
Sure.
you're a current student listening to this, check out your campus's advising offices. And it can literally be as easy as like Googling the name of your school and the word advising or career counseling or career advising. Sometimes these offices go by different titles at different schools. And sometimes there can be more than one advising office at an institution. So sometimes advising is seen as like academic advising, like what major do I choose? What courses do I take? How do I know when I'm eligible to graduate? What happens if I need to drop a course? What happens if I fail a course? Like those are academic advising kinds of questions. Career advising is a little bit more big picture, a little bit more like what kind of jobs can I get with this degree? How do I find work opportunities while I'm in school? What do I even want to do with my life? Like, what does it all mean? What's the purpose of work? What's the purpose of my career? What if I want to go to grad school or work abroad or do something that's like beyond the context of your current degree. And career counseling also encompasses some nitty gritty stuff like how do I write an effective resume or cover letter or LinkedIn profile or do a good job interview? There's a whole lot of topics that career counselors can help address with you. And then, of course, there are other kinds of advisors on campus too, like financial aid advisors, study abroad advisors. Somewhat depends on your campus and how things are structured. But yeah, if you're a current student, just know that you probably can get some kind of career advising support for free through your school.
Yeah, thank you for that insight, Carly. And again, for making it very easy to take action around that. I think the PSA format was perfect. I think your school name, space, career services, or career advising. I think people will actually do that. And I think it's worth saying because I've been in a lot of workshops where we teach something like the STAR model. And
Hmm.
I have to remind myself constantly that for many students, it's the first time they're hearing about it.
Hmm.
So to me, it's second nature, but hopefully hearing it in that format where it's clearly and easily laid out just makes someone go, "Oh, I didn't realize it could be that easy." And so I do
Yeah,
appreciate you spelling it out for us. It
yeah.
is helpful.
It's no problem. And I know I've met with a lot of students who are like quite far into their educational journey and had no idea that my office existed until one day somehow they found out. Like
Yeah.
I worked at a school where students were entitled to a maximum of 3 free career advising appointments per year. Not all schools have caps like that, but that office did. And I had a student come to me. They were in their 4th year, final semester before graduating. I forget how, but they just found out we existed. And at the end of our appointment, he was like, "Oh, this was so useful. I can't believe I didn't know this existed.
Yeah.
How can I come back? Like, can I come back? How does it work?" And I said, "Yeah, you get up to three free appointments per year, or just 3 appointments per year. It wasn't like we charged students beyond that. We just had
Yeah,
a
the limit, yeah.
cap." And he goes, "Oh, but I haven't been here until 4th year, so now am I entitled to 12 free appointments?" And I was like, ooh, I don't think it works that way. But again, there
But
was
it
some
was so exciting.
flexibility. Yeah, like if somebody really needed a fourth appointment and we could help them with what they were working on, we would try to fit them in. It's just challenging because universities and colleges typically only have like a small number of advisors for thousands and thousands of students. But
Yeah.
yeah, we have people on campuses who are happy to help. So go find them.
Yeah, that is a great reminder. So I do hope we see more and more students using those services. And I know we're getting close to kind of the time I had asked you for today, so I won't keep you much longer, but um I just wonder kind of from your vantage point, if you're seeing opportunities that students should be aware of kind of pop up. Like the workforce is just changing so quickly. So
Mhm.
are you noticing, specific jobs or specific industries um, starting to present more opportunities that students, could become aware of that they might have not heard of before? Because like you're saying, things have changed so much. Like, are you seeing any interesting opportunities we could make students aware of?
Yes, I'm not like a job board factory, so these are not like specific postings per se, but in terms of industries that are in demand these days, there are a few that come to mind. A big one, as I'm sure a lot of people know and are thinking about, is healthcare. And that's particularly true for people who are thinking long term, and especially if you're located in Canada. We have quite an aging population cohort, right? Like quite a large cohort of the population that is aging and going to be needing more healthcare supports. So things like nurses and PSWs are in high demand and will probably continue to grow. There are other types of healthcare roles that are also projected to increase in demand, but those are two particularly big ones. And many provinces have responded accordingly in the past couple years, opening up like more nursing and PSW post-secondary programs and providing funding and additional kind of financial incentives for people to pursue those fields. So that's definitely one to consider. I also currently work in the automotive industry. Actually, I just started a new position like a few months ago.
Oh, well,
And
congratulations, by the way.
thank you. This is one of my very few jobs that's like officially outside of higher education. I still work with higher ed institutions in some ways, but I'm also working a bit more with industry directly and sometimes with government and other stakeholders.
Okay.
And I have to say, in Ontario, the automotive industry is huge and also continuing to grow. The government here is making a lot of investments in bringing more automotive manufacturing companies to Ontario with the transition to electric vehicle production. There are a lot of factor or like plants that are set to open, but
Right.
there are also a lot of jobs in automotive that people don't necessarily think about. So it's not just manufacturing jobs of people on a line, like producing parts. And it's also not just all engineers. There are non technical jobs too. And there are also other types of technical jobs that are becoming more common. So, like cars these days increasingly include a lot of software elements like touchscreens and stuff like that. We need software programmers to be programming those. Certainly, people know that software development exists as a career, but people who are in those fields of study or pursuing those careers don't always consider automotive as like a place to land in their career. But there absolutely are a lot of jobs in like software, UX research, or UX, UI kind of stuff in the automotive industry. um, there are like non-technical jobs like HR, finance, marketing, sales, business operations, like any type of business job that exists in any other job, or sorry, in any other industry
Yeah.
also exists in automotive, but not everybody thinks about it. And automotive isn't big in every province, but it is particularly big in Ontario these days. And then some other fields that I hear are highly in demand these days are retail and tourism. Those are jobs that need people that have a hard time sometimes finding people. Sometimes the work can be seasonal. Sometimes the work, particularly in tourism, can be in remote locations that makes it less appealing to some people, but also makes it more appealing to other people. So if you're up for an adventure and if you're looking for a career that will ultimately be uh, like more human oriented, I guess, or you'll be interacting with people on a day to day basis, consider retail or tourism. Those are industries that also need people.
Oh, those are really cool, recommendations or just kinda like, industries to make us aware of, Carly. Because 'cause I've heard a lot about, Gen AI and that type of thing, and it's like, of course, um,
Hmm.
but it's funny you mentioned automotive. That was the first my first job was in an automotive factory,
Huh.
and I
That's
loved
very
it.
cool.
I loved that. It was a ton of fun.
Cool.
Really, really cool industry to be a part of. Um, and it's funny you mentioned kind of the seasonal jobs as well. My parents recently, completely changed their careers. They weren't quite ready to
Love
retire.
hearing about people who change careers like at a later stage in life.
I love it too. It's really, really encouraging to see. And my parents, I'm lucky, are great role models for that. They've done it a couple times, but they
Huh.
recently took over a campground in upstate New
Huh.
York, which I
That's
currently am
so
at right now.
cool.
Yeah, so they have seasonal jobs available that I had never heard of. I didn't know this was a thing. But yeah,
Yeah,
for six
campsite
months,
operators are definitely a thing.
yeah, it's so cool. People come here and they stay for 6 months and they work and live on the campground, and it's a completely different world that we've kinda jumped into, but one that I did not know existed. So, yeah, those are really cool fields to keep an eye out for, and I'm glad you mentioned them. Those aren't I haven't heard them spoken about yet, so thank you.
Well, thanks. And I think that's such a great lesson from your parents too, right? That like we're not going to know all the potential options for what our careers will contain when we're young.
Yeah,
And sometimes there are people who want to explore like every possible option before making any decision. And that's fair. You're welcome to explore plenty of options. I know I certainly did. I didn't even talk about half the things that I explored on this podcast, but yeah, I've explored plenty in my career, and I'm sure I'll continue exploring more as I continue to grow and age. In some ways, I feel like I'm just getting started in my career,
100.
and yet your parents, presumably with like decades of work experience
Yeah,
behind them, have now entered a totally new field of work. So that's
yeah.
exciting.
It really is. Yeah, and it sounds like you're doing the same, right? You're in a new field. Um, and yeah, they've done that a couple times. My father started in accounting, and then he decided he wanted to spend more time with us as a family, so he opened a martial arts studio. We did
Cool.
that for 20 years, and now we're doing this. So that's kind of built. I've been lucky. That's kind of baked into my family, but again, there's a different approach for everyone. So I really appreciate you kind of kicking this off with that reminder that, what works for one, may not work for someone else or may just in part work. So keep that in mind, folks. You know, if you're catching this one, just give yourself a chance to kind of explore. And I just want to say thank you again, Carly, for coming on here, sharing these
No
insights. It
problem.
was really
Thanks for
interesting.
inviting me. And if
Oh,
there's
absolutely.
one final thing I can say
I was gonna ask. Yeah, please do.
for it is I think there was something you said about me being in a fully new industry that I also wanted to comment on and say, yes, technically I'm in a fully new industry. I've never worked in auto. I'm kind of at the intersection of like automotive and like government slash nonprofit. My
Okay.
current workplace is in an interesting location, like conceptually,
Right.
but it's not like I work for an automotive company or like manufacturer like it sounds like you did. But yes, it's my first time working in this industry, but the experiences that I've had in my career so far are what helped me get here, and they're what's helping me do the work. So I found even though the work is different, it's also the same in certain ways. So I have a different type of job title now, but actually maybe not that different. So like I often refer to myself as a career counselor, and technically that's been one of my job titles. But my most recent job title was actually career strategist, and now my current job title is workforce and talent strategist. So I am basically working with the automotive industry and with higher ed institutions and with other stakeholders in the kind of automotive ecosystem to help them figure out how do we develop a talent pipeline for this industry. And that involves educational institutions. So my understanding of how educational institutions work, how students work, how careers work broadly has actually been very valuable and helpful to me getting this job as well as to me being in this job and doing the work so far. So this is let this be a lesson, and I'm sure you have lessons from your own parents' career transitions too, where like the things you learn along the way are also helpful. It's not like you're going from 0 to 100 and then back to 0. You might be going from like 0 to 30 and then back to 20 and then up to 50 and then back to 45 and like whatever.
Yeah.
Different places along the way. So when you said your dad started as an accountant and then opened his own martial arts business
Yeah.
or studio, I forget the word you used. I'm sure being an accountant helped him like have the financial acumen to do that and probably manage his own business accounting and finances. And
100%.
sure, somebody else with a different background also could open a karate or martial arts studio. Sorry, I just said karate. You didn't say karate, but could open a martial arts studio. But I'm sure his accounting background helped him do so in a particular way.
Yeah, it's a great point. Thank you for bringing that up. It's so true how those skills kind of complement each other and build on each other along the way. So, yeah, it's interesting kind of what you'll end up using that you might not expect in a totally different area. So thanks. Yeah, thank you, Carly. That's a great point as well. And I think we'll have to have you back on because I do feel like we've only heard about the tip of the iceberg in terms of your career and also just the insights and stories you have to share. So thanks for making the time today. And I think we'll have to reach back out to get you on here in the future if you don't mind.
Okay, well, I'll look forward to it. Yeah, definitely a pleasure speaking with you too. Thanks so much and take care.
You as well. Have a good one.
You too. Bye.
Bye.